Abortion rights are human rights for women and rights that relate to their autonomy. For this reason, they should get to decide what happens to their choice over their own bodies. First, I'm going to give you the model for this round, make it very clear. If you have any questions, please ask them after that. And then I'm going to go into my 2 points of positive matter. One's going to be autonomy, which is a philosophical argument, and the other one's going to be consequences, which is a pragmatic argument. So first, let's talk about the model. So laws about abortion, when we talk about laws about abortion, we're talking laws regarding funding, time restriction of abortion, what's too much of a burden to impose on abortion clinics. For example, the case in Texas where they wanted to expand the width of the hallways so that a gurney, a medical gurney could fit. Second, by a referendum we mean direct democracy, that is, people voting directly for the legislation or against the legislation. And lastly, by women we mean legally understood to be women. So that can change state to state. We are okay with that. We also think that we're not okay with certain definitions of women. We should change that, but not because of that should we invalidate our idea. So on to my first point of positive matter. Any questions? Clarification? Nope? Okay, cool. So first, abortion questions are questions about rights. It's a rights-related referendum. For this reason, women should make the choice. And let's talk about things that women understand that are risks behind every single pregnancy. You face things like postpartum depression. You face things like higher death rates due to childbirth than a lot of other things. For example, abortion. Like, childbirth has 10 times a higher likelihood of resulting in death than an abortion. Lastly, it also involves a lot of intimacy that can happen without or with your consent if abortion is banned. So let me explain this. The reason why things like sexual assault are so terrible is because something that should be an intimate experience that you consented to are happening to you without your consent, without you agreeing with it happening. Pregnancy can be something beautiful, something uniquely bonding you to another human being, or it can be something traumatic when you do not have a say on how it happens, when it happens, and whether it happens. For this reason, women should be making these decisions. These decisions will directly affect them. On the other side, if men are participating in this referenda, they are not directly affected by this. They're only indirectly affected by proxy, like their daughter, their mother, their wife, or like a person, like a woman they know is undergoing these things, and they can suffer because of that. They can feel that pain through them, whatever, but it's not the same as it happening to you. Also, women understand this better, even women who are no longer in reproductive age. It's important to say. Any questions before I go into my other argument? Nope, cool. All right, the next argument is regarding consequences. It's the pragmatic side of our argument. So basically, we believe that because women will be making these decisions, it is less likely that abortion will be outright criminalized and banned. And let me explain why. The reason is that women of all creeds, of all races, of all places, and backgrounds, understand that pregnancies happen, that they not always happen when you're ready for them, when you're physically able to have them, when you're in a supportive relationship to be able to receive a child into this world. Women understand these things. And for example, let me give you a number to just explain to you how this occurs in reality, even in the US, where it seems that people are very, what's the name of that? Polarized. The numbers show that Catholic women and evangelical women have abortions at about the same rate as any other women in the population. So basically, religion is not a factor that goes into the decision when you are deciding what to do with your life and the life of your child, because a lot of people think that it's it's not okay to bring a child into this world when you're not ready and when you're not going to be able to give them the life that they deserve. For this reason, we believe that it's less likely that abortion will be banned. And why is this good? Why do we care that there won't be a ban on abortion when only women can vote? This is important because bans on abortion don't mean that abortions will not continue happening. So that's bad. That's bad because of two things. One, what conservatives maybe want is for abortions to stop happening, for the murder to stop. That won't happen. What will occur is that it will go underground, which is now the case in places like India and places like South America. They continue happening, and the worst part is that women are dying. The reason why the US got Roe v. Wade in 1973 is because of a big campaign that actually organized after the gruesome death of this woman in 1966 because of a botched abortion. She died. She already had 3 children, and she died in a hotel room. I don't remember her name. She died in a hotel room after trying to get rid of the child, the fetus, with crochet needles, and she was found like that in the hotel room. We believe that women understand these things better. They are the ones who are going to be suffering the consequences if abortion is banned or just prohibited within outside of reason. For these reasons, very proud to propose. Thanks.
All right, Leader Bob.
A fundamental part of our democracy is the ability of morally capable and free-thinking individuals to partake in the decision-making process. We here at OP believes that this motion firmly goes against that notion and undermines the very basis of our modern democracy. To begin, I will start with my refutation, and I will go into 2 points of positive matter. For the refutation, the government says that it deals with specifically a women's rights issues. Therefore, women should be the only ones who should be involved in this process. But men have rights too, and they have the right to vote and hold, right to have opinions, the right to think freely, the right to act as a moral being. And that ability to act as a moral being, to act upon what you believe is right or wrong, is a fundamental part of any good, morally minded society. Now, I will take one PI.
Are you saying that a man's right to vote is more important than a woman's right to her own bodily autonomy?
What I am saying is that the most fundamental aspect of any moral society is the ability to act on those moral preconceptions. If I see someone getting murdered in the street and you say I do not have the right to act upon that murder, to try and stop that murder from occurring because I believe it is morally wrong to murder someone just because it does not directly involve me and my physical well-being, that is definitely not what I would believe to be a moral society, and that is what here at OP we are fighting for. They then proceed to talk about how it directly affects women, and yes, this directly affects women. This very much so affects women, but at the same time, we pass legislation, we act on things that do not directly affect us all the time because as individuals, we are capable of thinking in abstract and moral terms. What government is doing is they are providing a framework in which men are not capable of having opinions and moral ideas on something that does not immediately and directly affect them. According to Gov, I would not be able to have an opinion on the Holocaust because I am not Jewish. I would not be able to have opinions on, or be able to enact or be involved in the decision-making process in regards to, say, foreign policy because I don't live outside the United States or my home country. I would not be able to act morally against no thank you. I would not be able to say, even more pragmatically speaking, I would not be able to vote for representatives based on an issue that does not immediately affect me, such as, say, such as agriculture or something like that. I mean, like, this is what we're getting into here. They also say that, they also talk about the consequences of this happening, but they talk about how it's less likely to be criminalized, women would have more rights. But I warn the fact that we are denying men the ability to act on the decision-making process will have far greater negative consequences on our democracy and our world than the effects of having only women being able to participate in abortion. So to get on to my points of positive amendment. The first point being that men are being, as I already talked about in my refutation, but I will go on to elaborate how men are morally capable and thinking individuals, and then I will talk about how you are taking away the right to vote and be a part of the democratic decision-making process, which is a fundamental and necessary part of any good, morally correct society. Firstly, it is not just, it is absolutely necessary for any morally correct society to allow all individuals who are capable of thinking and operating capable of thinking and dealing rationally, abstractly on matters that may not directly concern them. Any rational individual is the fundamental aspect of a good society is that any rational individual who is capable of thinking is able to have an opinion and voice that opinion, and not only and be a part of the decision-making and policy-making process of that good society. That is the most important part of any good society. And then this goes down to my second point of how, in a democracy, it is important that all members are involved in the decision-making process. They talk about how in a referendum this is going to be, this is going to only involve women, and how only women are going to be able to vote and partake in a policy debate, but men, they are fundamentally denying the philosophical idea of men and women being equals, and men and women both being equally capable of thinking and having opinions and believing in things morally right or wrong. They are denying men their ability to rationally operate, to think of some things as being morally right or wrong. If a man thinks that this is morally right or morally acceptable, he should be able to voice his opinion. He should be able to vote in favor of that opinion. If he thinks it is wrong, he should also be able to partake in that opposite direction. And we here at opposition, we clearly say that we believe that for a morally good society, for a society that upholds democratic values of plurality, of free thought, of being able to rationally think and make choices that may or may not directly involve you, we believe that it is necessary, absolutely necessary, that all individuals have a right to be a part of that policy-making process, no matter whether or not they're directly a member of that group. We believe that it is important that I have the right to vote, even if it is not immediately involved in who I am. We here in opposition do strongly believe that morality can be determined by anyone who is capable of thinking for themselves, and that we should not deny people the ability to act upon what they think is morally right or morally wrong, and that is why we strongly oppose this motion. Thank you.
All right, Deputy Prime Minister.
So first off, I'm going to go into a little bit of reputation and rebuilding, and then I'm going into my I'm not going to have any new positive matter. I'm just going to go a little bit deeper into what my partner briefly touched on, which was the emotional effects that a woman can go through during a pregnancy, wanted or unwanted. So the leader of opposition gets up here and he tells you, men have rights too. Yeah, we agree with that, but the issue that we're talking about, the men's rights aren't being stripped away. The opposition is confused, first of all. We are not taking away men's right to vote at all, protected time. We're not taking away men's right to vote. They can still vote in midterms and every other election. We are just saying that considering this specific issue and ballots regarding abortion, they cannot vote, which we think is completely fair because their rights aren't being removed, but women's rights are being removed. He also stands up here and says abortion is murder, and you can't just go out and murder someone on the street and not do anything about it. Yeah, we agree that you can't go out in the street and murder someone, but we don't believe that abortion is murder. Women can choose to restrict abortion if that's what they believe. We're not getting up here and saying that women are going to make all abortion legal or that there's going to be no restriction on abortion. It can happen whenever. Women can make whatever decision they want to. We are just giving you pros of why we believe women would choose to have abortion remain legal and not be criminalized. They're also saying that men have the right to their opinion. Yeah, they do. They can express that opinion however they want. They just can't do it on this specific ballot. They can vote for senators or governors who are pro-abortion or anti-abortion, who also have a say in these state laws. Their voice isn't going to not be heard. We're just going to let the women actually have more of a voice to be heard. No thanks. He also gets into men and women are equal. Well, we don't see this in the status quo right now. Women's rights are being challenged all the time, and I can't think of any men's rights off the top of my head that are being challenged. There's not a men's march on Washington. There's not a wage gap for men. There's not staggering amounts of sexual assaults on men. There's way more sexual assaults on women than there are men. Yeah, men, their rights aren't going to be taken away because they're still going to be allowed to vote. And also, on the opposition side, we don't believe that it would be right to vote for any group of people to vote on limiting the rights of another group of people. Say we wanted to get rid of synagogues in the city. Well, would you have people who aren't Jewish voting to get rid of the synagogues just because it kind of affects me because my neighbor's Jewish? No, we wouldn't have that. That's ridiculous. And OP perpetrates the history of men making decisions for women. This is something that has been going on forever. Women have not always had the right to vote, so we think we should exercise this right that we have gained through hard work, through marches, through arrests, through beatings by the police. We have earned the right to vote, and we want to use it, and we want to be heard for this specific issue. Yeah.
How are we denying women the right to vote when they still have the ability to vote for legislators who are opposed or against or whatever in the status quo?
We're not denying them that right, just like we're not denying men that right to vote, but we're just saying that since this is such an intimate thing and something that affects women so strongly, that we believe that their voice should be more important than a male's voice who isn't necessarily going to understand as well as a woman. So, kind of getting into a little bit of rebuilding, we are talking about a woman's autonomy. We are talking about her right to her body, her right to make a choice, her choice on whether she wants to carry a child for 9 months of her life, have to take maternity leave, possibly lose her job. That's a major thing that we're looking at here, because if men are allowed to vote and their influence is stronger than women's and they restrict abortion, then we are putting these women in situations that they don't necessarily want to be in. Like my partner said, pregnancy is a very intimate thing. You have something literally growing inside of you for 9 months that affects your mood, that affects your job, that affects your health. It's so intimate and so vastly important that the women be heard on this. Like my partner said, the death rate for women who go into childbirth is higher than those who have an abortion. So I'm going to go a little bit deeper into what my partner briefly touched on, which is the emotional effects that a pregnancy can have on a woman. Postpartum depression specifically is a very big thing that happens after pregnancy in a lot of women, and this can lead to suicide, which leaves a child motherless. It leaves a single father. It could possibly take away a potential income. Not to mention the literal loss of life, because a woman could not handle her own emotions due to what this child did to her. And postpartum depression isn't something that's like widely talked about. There's kind of a stigma to it, like you aren't strong enough or you aren't going to be a good enough mother because you have this postpartum depression, which isn't your fault at all. So we want to prevent that, and we want to prevent this emotional trauma that could potentially have to happen to this woman. I'd like to give an example. There's a surprise pregnancy between a couple that hasn't been going out very long. The father wants to keep the child, but the mother does not. So because the father doesn't want her to have an abortion, she keeps the pregnancy, but she makes it extremely clear to him that she will not be involved after the child's birth. So that leaves him a single father. She pays her child support, she does everything right, but the father is extremely overwhelmed by the fact that he has this new child and he can't work like he wants to because he has to take care of a newborn. He is stressed out, he is scared, he doesn't know what's going on because he's never done this before, and he doesn't have the support of the woman who carried her child because she tried to voice her opinion that she didn't want this pregnancy and she wanted to keep her bodily autonomy and say, no, I don't want this, I'm not ready for this, but he insisted that she keep the baby. We think this is fundamentally wrong, and this is why we believe that women should be voting on abortion issues and have more of a voice than men. Proud to propose, my bad.
Okay, first of all, I would like to start out with some refutation, and then I will rebuild some of my partner's arguments, and then introduce a new point. First of all, you have brought up rights repeatedly, and that's okay, like it's women's rights, but we're looking at it as also a moral issue. And morality extends beyond just women. Like, just women aren't the only ones who get to have a moral opinion on whether that is a life inside of them or not. And that is where my partner is coming from when he was saying that you're restricting men's right to speak on their own moral opinions. Not that you're taking away their right to vote, but their right to voice moral opinions. And on another thing, you're admittedly trying to shape the outcome of the vote. Like one of the Prime Minister's main points was that this would make it more likely for abortion not to be outlawed. Doesn't that take away the exact definition of democracy by shaping the system to get what you want?
Why wouldn't women want to claim their rights and not have them stripped from them and keep their bodily autonomy? Why would they not want that?
Well, for one thing, it's bold to speak for all women everywhere. And another thing is that, once again, speaking from a moral standpoint, you're operating under the view that the majority of women have this one view, that this is their thing, that this is their life, and that men have no say in it, and it's bodily autonomy. But that's not every woman everywhere is going to think that.
Okay, Ob has to explain why it's okay for men to strip away women's rights without being directly affected by that stripping.
they are not stripping away women's rights because women still have the right to vote just like everyone else. And for another thing, the Deputy Prime Minister even went into how it does affect men. She talked about the father that ends up with this child being overworked and overwhelmed. Well, when you talk about laws pertaining to abortion, it could go either way. The women could outlaw it, and then men who didn't want a baby could end up with one. So you have already said how it directly affects men in that way. And then going back to my partner's comment on how it takes away rights to be heard, we have never in history limited a vote just to the people it directly affects. Like segregation, did we just let African Americans vote on that? Or even women's ability to vote, did we just let women vote on that?
Exactly.
No, it's never before happened. So why all of a sudden are we saying that, oh, this doesn't affect them so they don't get a say? Again, that's just the government trying to shape democracy to get the outcome that they want. And then a new point that was touched on a little bit is that not all women are affected by abortion. There are women who are medically unable to have children. There's women who have had hysterectomies. There are women post-menopause. And then you get into the whole new age movement of LGBTQ, transgender women. You said a little bit about legally women. Well, when does that line cross? A couple years ago, there's a big news story about the pregnant man. It was a transgender man who had not completed transition, but identified as a man, had become pregnant. Does he not get to vote on what happens or his ability to terminate that pregnancy? You did touch on that women who are post-menopause would still understand. Well, what if they don't? What if they never had children? I am a registered woman voter, but I have not had a child. I have not been around people who have had a child. I do not understand the effects at all. But a man who has seen his wife go through that with his own child, he understands the effects that I don't as a young woman who's not been affected by pregnancy. And I think taking away their right to comment on what they have seen, I feel mean. Taking away their right to comment on things that they do understand and that they have seen. And then, there's also the problem of women being affected by pregnancy that are not yet old enough to vote. You got into sexual assault and things like that. There's been girls as young as 12 that have been affected by sexual assault and pregnancy, and they're too young to have a say. So if you're going off of the assumption of whoever is affected gets to vote, then do we start letting 14, 15-year-old women vote because they can become pregnant? And then one last point is about the model itself. It's your use of a referendum vote. It's pretty clear that moral views vary by area and population densities, such as a small Midwestern town is logistically more conservative and against it as compared to large population densities that may be more liberal and want to allow it. And all of that together is why we strongly oppose.